We switch gears now. The NGO Life in Leggings, a Caribbean alliance against gender-based violence, began as a hashtag which women around the region used to share their stories about harassment. Leggings because a wide cross-section of women wear leggings, and harassment doesn't care about class or what you're actually wearing. And since we're still observing the UN's 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we wanted to take the time to highlight the experiences of Caribbean women, since the region is still the most violent in the world for women and girls, according to the United Nations. Hi, Ronelle. Thank you so much for joining us. So to discuss the gender-based violence in the Caribbean, we are being joined by Ronelle King, who is the creator of Life in Leggings. I'm trying to figure out where to look. Ronelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So really quickly, why did you start Life in Leggings?
Well, I started it from based on personal experiences, but it was just general frustration from how we as women in the Caribbean are treated.
And why start an NGO? Because Life in Leggings started as a hashtag online. You got a lot of responses from women throughout the region, not just in Barbados. Let's just emphasize Life in Leggings started in Barbados because you're Bayesian, but it went viral across the region. And a lot of women were using the hashtag to detail their experiences of harassment. So, but why turn it into an NGO?
Well, we knew that the space, the hashtag was created as a safe space so that women across the region and in the diaspora, because it did travel as far as Japan, China, and wherever Caribbean women were, they utilized the hashtag. The reason behind turning it into NGO is because there's always more to be done to address gender-based violence, and we needed to take it from online to offline and really get into beginning to address it.
And what does the Life in Leggings NGO do? What sort of work are you all doing now that you've been incorporated as a company?
Right. So the NGO is still relatively new. We've expanded into the region. We've started tracking femicides in the Caribbean region. We've started as well as releasing regional call to actions looking for missing girls because we realize, especially in the region, there's a hypersexualization of especially Black girls where they go missing and persons don't really take it as seriously as they should. We've done lobbying, for constitutional, legislative, and policy frameworks to address gender-based violence, and support grassroots organizations on the ground in the region who've been lobbying for years and basically like amplifying their voices to get those changes.
Now, Ronelle, you're doing really good work. You've been recognized. You're one of the 2018 Queen's Young Leaders. So what advice do you have for Caribbean governments as it relates to gender-based violence, reducing our very, very high rates, because the Caribbean and Latin America has some of the highest rates in the world, and stemming, our incidents of rape and that sort of thing? What should Caribbean governments be doing policy-wise?
Well, they should be listening to the women, listening to the organizations on the ground that work with these women, because your country cannot be sustainable, it cannot go forward if half the gender is held back. If we have to deal with these issues, it means that we're not living to our full potential. We're not feeling safe in our countries. We're not able to, contribute as much as we would like to and live full lives, most importantly. So, yeah.
And Ronelle, you're very young. What has really inspired you, or what keeps you going with your work in this fight against reducing the high rates of gender-based violence in the Caribbean?
Because every woman has the fundamental right to feel safe in public, private, and virtual spaces. And especially because I don't want the next generation to experience what I had to experience. I believe that it's each of our civic responsibility to make the changes that are necessary. We benefit from changes that our ancestors made and the resistances that they led so that we don't have to experience what they experienced. And so we continue that and ensuring that the future generation does not experience what we did.
And really quickly, I wanted to end on a positive note. So what are some of the things that have made you very proud in doing your work on fighting gender-based violence in the last 2 years? What are some of the biggest gains that you've achieved?
I think it is regional awareness, especially with the targets that we didn't we expected major backlash from men. But I find, especially in the Caribbean region, in certain countries, we've gotten a lot of support from men as well, and they've done some reflection on how they contributed to the problem, what they can do to address it, and more importantly, hold their fellow brothers accountable to do better in future.
Thank you so much for chatting with us. We've been speaking to Ronelle King. She is usually based in Barbados, but right now she's in Trinidad. And we've been speaking to her about her work in the fighting gender-based violence throughout the Caribbean. Thank you so much for joining us, Ronelle.
Thank you for having me.